Once you've decided on your main formula that you're going to use to determine how good your players are, that's when you will then sort out some of your top 3 prospects and do some deeper analysis on them. So I'm going to go ahead and add in one new column, and I'm going to call this super formula. And I'm going to actually, my super formula plan is to add these 2 attributes together into one quote-unquote super formula. So equals C2 plus D2. I'm going to add those 2 things together, and then I'm going to sort everyone by that. So you can create a few things and kind of mush them together into a single formula. And let's see who my top 3 players are. It looks like I have Sophia, Sebastian, and Ariana. So these are the 3 players that I'm going to want to do deeper analysis on. They're the top 3 from my super formula, the ones that I most want on my team. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go back to the website, the main website. I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom where it has player data.xlsx. I'm going to go to this down arrow to download it. Once it downloads, I'll click on it so that it opens up in Excel. Once you have Excel open, you're going to want to enable editing. Note that it might take a while for Excel to come up. So you'll want to enable your editing, and when that is finished loading, you're going to want to pick an attribute of those 3 players that you're particularly interested in. So just to get a reminder of who we were looking at, let's go back to our spreadsheet, and we said Sophia here, Sebastian, and Ariana. So let's find those players now in the spreadsheet. Alright, here's Ariana. I'm going to highlight her. And then we've got Sophia right here, and then Sebastian is a little bit farther down, I believe. You can always search for players if you can't find them. So here I've highlighted all the players I want, and to simplify things, because there's so much data in the spreadsheet, I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete everything else, because there's just too many numbers that having all that extra data is probably going to make things very complicated. So for the sake of gathering your data for your distribution that you're going to do, go ahead and clear out everything that you're not interested in, and you can just drag over those cells and delete them. So now I only see the relevant rows. You'll also notice if you scroll down, you're going to see columns that extend for a very long time. So you'll see things that go all the way through G40 for every category. Every single game has a set of statistics dumped into it. So we're going to go through and find those stats by deleting everything else so that it's easier to see. Now, the stat that I said I wanted to look at was number of short catches per game. So if I delete all these other things, short catches here, I have 29, 9, and 5 for the first game for these 3 players. So then I'm going to go all the way up to G2, where that happens again, short catches. And I'm going to continue onwards, looking to weed out all of the additional data that does not belong. And you'll notice that this process probably takes a while. So here I'm holding down the Shift key on my keyboard because it allows me to move a little bit faster, a little more controlled. But this process will probably take a while. Now you don't have to delete the data like this. I just find that because you're going to be looking at it a decent amount here, it's probably the least prone to errors of any method that you're going to use. So I like to get this large spreadsheet down to something a little more manageable. So you go through and you keep deleting. I'm not going to record myself deleting every one of these, but you would get it all the way down until you have G1 through G40. Once you've gone through all this, I only went through game 15 just for the sake of example, but once you've gone through all this, you're going to want to go to your calculator, go to Stat, and go to Edit. Now, I'd recommend doing this process with pairs, where one of the teammates is reading off numbers and the other is entering it into their calculator. It'll go a lot faster than doing it by yourself. So let's start with Ariana, and we're going to list all of these numbers into her list 1. So in this case, 29, 13, 11, 13, and so forth, and I go all the way down through the 40 numbers. Once you have all your numbers in your list 1, I would actually recommend going straight to list 2, because there's a little trick that you can do to view this all at the same time. So if you go over to your list 2, you can start typing in your next person. So 9, 0, 8, 38, and so forth. And once you've got your list 2 filled up with all those data points, you can go over to list 3 and do the same thing with the last person. Now that all my data is in, I want to get a sense of what the summary stats look like, particularly the max and min for each of these. And I could just scroll up and down the list and get a sense of what the highest and lowest numbers are, and that would be one way to do it. Another one would be to go to my stat key, go to calc, and go to 1var stats, and hit enter. Now this is going to give me the 1var stats on list 1. So it looks like my box plot would go from 0 at a minimum to my box would be then 4 to 13 with 10 as my median, and I'd have a max of 29. If I wanted to get the 1var stats on everything else, I could go to stat, to calc, to 1var stats, and instead of hitting enter a second time right away, I'm going to go to second 2, which is going to be my list 2, and I can do the 1var stats on list 2 like that. So if I scroll down this time, it looks like I have a range from 0 to 38. So this one has a higher max. And then finally I can do this one more time for list 3. And I can see that my max here is even higher, 43, although my quarter 3 is actually much lower. So I have a few options for the types of graphs I would be able to create. I could do box plots, which would be pretty easy to do from the 5-number summaries here. I would just draw 3 box plots directly above each other using the same axis, and I could do that on paper, or I could use some sort of computer program to do that. Probably easiest to do that on paper. I could also create a histogram, and if I did that, I would create it in my calculator by going to my second y equals, my stat plot. And here it looks like my histogram is turned on for list 1. If I did my zoom 9, that's for stats, I could see the list 1 histogram right here. If I go to my window, I would want to tweak my window to be big enough for everyone. So I would probably make my x min stay at 0 and my x max. I would look for my highest value I had in any of my distributions. So let's say 45, and I would make my x scale, let's say 5. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to be consistent across all 3 histograms. So when I graph it, I'm going to see a lot of my data is probably a little bit over to the left, and I can see this general shape. If I go to my second stat plot, I can edit this to be list 2 that I'm making a stat histogram for by going over list 1, hitting second 2, and then going straight to graph. So I'm going to see a slightly different graph than I did for list 1, and then finally, same idea, go back to my stat plot options, down to the X list, choose list 3, and go straight to graph, and it will graph it on those same dimensions. And here, it looks like this category was so common it actually goes off the screen. So this third player, let's check the name of this third player. It was Sebastian. Looks like Sebastian is has some very high outliers that dragged up the total, but for the most part doesn't do particularly well. Whereas the other 2 players have a lot more good games. They're maybe not quite the outstanding game like Sebastian had here as that high outlier maximum, but have a lot more good games. So the whole point of this distribution analysis is to figure out if these totals are due to one incredible outlier that's dragging them up, or if it's a more consistent pattern, to see if it's skewed or normally distributed, all things that could help you in your analysis.